Hello, welcome to Santa Barbara House of Prayer series on the words of Jesus. This has been so fun to go through and really focus on the red words, the words that Jesus spoke and taught and shared. And today's words of Jesus come from Matthew 6. And it says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." So this is an amazing command of Jesus, or his words to us. But again, like all of the other words of Jesus that I've gone through before, this is a life strategy. This is a life strategy that Jesus gave to the people in the crowd. This is right after the Sermon on the Mount. And then, it's for us as well. And so, what is this really saying? I think there's the obvious message, don't make a performance out of your good deeds. Don't call attention to yourself and do things just to get recognition or to get glory or to get fame or to prove, who you are to someone, those types of things. But there's a deeper message as well. So I'm going to read the rest of it. "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." So that's the first clue. You will have no reward. "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." And it goes on from there. So it's interesting that it gives some examples of the good deeds to do in secret. He's basically saying, do these things in secret, and he gives some specific examples. And I think he had to give examples to the crowd that he was speaking to, because in that day, the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that's all they did was do things for show. Everything they did was an external, show, and it was all about how they looked in the public. And Jesus even rebuked them for that. So the people at that time, they didn't know any different. That was just their culture. The really religious people, the people that are really up here with God, this is what they look like. And they do all these things out in public for everyone to see. And so Jesus really had to give them examples of these things. So here they are. When you give to the poor, when you give to charity. And then after that, it says, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." So very interesting. When you give to the poor, when you give to charity, when you pray, do them in secret, not to be seen by others. So this is really interesting, and I believe this is a life strategy. I don't think that this is saying that it's wrong to have recognition, to be seen in public, to be famous. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not saying that. But I think this is saying that, if you do these things and you make a point to practice these things in secret, number one, you keep the issue of, trying to get fame and glory and that motivation of performance and the wrong motives for doing things. You keep that in balance and you keep your ego in check. That's what I think this is about, is keeping your ego in check and making sure that your need for approval and attention and to somehow get a false sense of your value by what other people think of you, it's helping you to not get to that point. It's very, very astonishing when I looked into this, because here's the thing: when you do these things in secret, when you give to the poor, you make your big donations, or you give to the needy, you give to a charity, you do your prayers, your prayer life, when you do those things in secret, There's no temptation. You eliminate the temptation to seek attention, to seek glory and fame, and for that to be your motivation. So you just stay out of that temptation, because here's the thing. In our human nature, there's something in our human nature that we want to be recognized. We want the attention, we want the glory, we want the fame. And I believe that exists in the soul part of you. You know, we're made of 3 parts. We have a spirit, we have a soul, and a body. And the soul is that invisible, immaterial part of us, but it is it's challenging, because the soul is the mind, will, and emotions. And the soul is tricky, because there can be things in your mind, there can be emotions that you have, that there can be things in the soul that are not correct, that are not true, based in truth. And so if the soul gets fed and the mind gets fed, you know, on the opinions of others, you allow the opinions of others and how you look to others to feed your mind and to feed your emotions, and the soul gets really big and rises up and takes over, and you're operating from your soul. Guess what? You're actually blocking your true identity. And when the soul is out in front with this big ego, and you start to crave, you know, the recognition of others, and because it kind of pumps you up and it kind of feeds you this inferior sense of value, when that's happening, your true identity, which exists in the deepest part of you, in your spirit being, that's where your identity is. Your true identity is blocked, and you're not functioning in your true identity. You're functioning in this false identity, basically. So I believe that this life strategy that Jesus gives, it's basically an identity exercise. It's a way to unlock and allow your true identity to come forth, and to prevent you from cultivating and growing a false identity. So this is amazing. This is such profound wisdom in living this way and practicing these things. Because here's the thing, you know, our ego, this is what an ego is. An ego is a false identity. That's what ego means. It means our ego is our sense of self-worth, our self-consciousness, and who we are in our minds. That's what an ego is. And it's how we relate to the outside world. So if who we are in our minds is incorrect, if it's based on, you know, false beliefs, negative perceptions we have of ourselves, then we're going to relate to the outside world through that. Instead of relating and interacting with the outside world from our true self, our truest, most authentic, genuine self and identity. And the problem is that our minds, who we think we are in our minds, can be wrong. And this is a soul issue, because if our ego is in charge and running, and we continue to feed it, the ego will keep us from really seeing, knowing, and understanding the truth of who we are, and connecting with our true identity and seeing what we really have in our hearts. And that is a tragedy, because your true identity is blocked and you begin to live a lie. And one of the most destructive things that can happen in a person is to live incongruently with yourself, misaligned with yourself, and not living authentically in the truth of who you are. It is one of the most destructive sources of internal stress that exists. So destructive that alone, just living a lie and incongruent with the truth of who you are, it can cause mental disorders, you know, anxiety. It can cause depression. It can cause physical conditions and diseases and sicknesses. And it really blocks the truth in your spirit, your highest, truest self. It blocks that, and it can even interfere with your ability to have success in your life, in your career, in your job, because you may be living beneath or elevated sense of yourself that's not true. And so it literally affects every important area of your life, this one thing. And so the fact that Jesus is giving a strategy to stay out of this destructive way of operating is just so profound and incredible that that's in the Bible. And I want to give you an example of a person without their ego running them. Okay, so when the ego is managed and it's not running the show, this is what it looks like. Confidence without arrogance. Humility without insecurity. Fully present. At peace with yourself. Functioning as your true self. Without fear. No fear of man or fear of failing or fear of not being good enough. That's freedom. You can know and believe the truth of your value and worth. So you're not having to create these situations and scenarios to prove your value and your worth, or to find out if you're valuable enough. You don't have to do any of that. There's an ease and a rest, and you're completely free, freedom to be yourself. And this is what Jesus is after, this right here. Because this list that I went through, if this is growing and cultivated within you, you are unstoppable. There's nothing that can hold you back. There's nothing to fear. There's only freedom. It's like full speed ahead for where you can go and what you can do and how you can impact the world around you, because you're operating in your full potential, your truest self, your full purpose in life, and nothing is blocking it. Nothing's hindering it. Nothing is getting in the way. And so it's really, really powerful, and it's actually a way to live, and it's actually the most fulfilling and satisfying way to live. And that's where the depression comes in, when you're not living your most authentic self and functioning in your truth of who you are. A lot of times that's where the depression sets in, because your being instinctually knows that you're not living your full potential and purpose, and that gets depressing, as you could imagine. And so what you ideally, the ideal way to function is to operate from your spirit being, your innermost being. That's where your identity is. Your identity is not in the soul. Your soul's kind of the in-between part of you. Your spirit is where your identity is, and it's 100% true. And there's no experience or negative words spoken to you or fear that exists down there in your spirit. And so it's only truth, and it's the best version of you. And so, it says that you will receive a reward. You will receive a reward either way. Either way, if you're doing what this verse is talking about, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, praying in the public and giving to the poor, doing all your good deeds out in public to be seen and recognized, and to, influence the opinions of other people about you. If that's your motivation and that's how you're operating, you'll receive a kind of a reward. It's an inferior reward, because you get a temporary sense of self-worth and value. For a few moments you feel really valuable and that you have a lot of worth because you're in public and you may get good feedback, or you may gain fame or attention, but it's temporary. That's your reward that you get. That's it. But the real reward, if you're doing these things in secret and managing the ego and operating from your truest self and allowing your identity to come forth and shine, then the reward is, then you get the real reward. Because what happens is your true identity, you get to see and understand and know and connect with your true identity and who you really are. That's one of the rewards. The other reward is that you're at peace with yourself and you're connected with yourself. So there's no striving, there's no fear, there's no pressure. It's just, there's an ease and there's a rest, and that's when you really know your true value and worth. You get a true sense of your value and worth, because your value and worth comes from God. So the real unperverted reward, when you cease from performing and striving and trying to get your sense of value by being seen and recognized in public and doing everything for a show, the real reward is that you get that. We all need to have that. We all have a need to be approved of, to be valued, and to to know, we all want to know whether we're good enough or not. But the reward is that we get that. We get that question answered from God himself, from the true source. And so we get filled with the truth of our value and our worth from the real source. We align with it, we accept it, we believe it, and we operate from that need that's been met by God himself, by truth. And then we're not operating from a need. We're operating from a place of fullness where we're just free to give and to shine and to radiate the glory of God within us. There's no other extra motivation. There's no other motivation that's getting in the way. So, I mean, that is the real reward. And it says, when you go into your room, close the door and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So you get rewarded with the true sense of value and worth from your Father. That's where you get it. You get it from your Father. And then there's just freedom. And I just wanted, this spoke to me too. I want to just put this into practice, to practice doing our good deeds in secret. Just practice it. And you know, it's gonna grow this sense of confidence and humility that we talked about. It's gonna get the ego out of the way, and it's gonna allow your true identity, your most authentic self, to rise up, and you're gonna begin to receive the truth from your Father of your value and your worth. And so then there's no reason to go try to get it from the outside world. You already have it within you. So thank you, God. Thank you, God, that that's the reward, that we can get our sense of value and worth. We can get the truth of that from you, from your heart, Father God. So then we don't have a need for it. We don't have a need to strive or to overcompensate or to perform or to get recognitions. We're just free to be and to relax, and then to let our true identities come out and radiate and shine and impact the world around us. And God, would you just remind us this week to practice these things, to practice doing our good deeds in secret, and to allow confidence and humility to grow, to allow our true identities to come out and to come up, so that we can see it and understand it and align with it and believe it. And I just declare right now, I just declare the truth of our value, our worth, and acceptance that comes from your heart over each one of us today, and that we would receive it fully, believe it, and operate from that truth. In Jesus'